Welcome, everyone. This is going to be an action-packed hour long, and it'll be a lot of fun. So let's just get into it. This is me. I'm principal at Veritas Group. I've been doing this work for over 32 years now, and I absolutely love it. And I hope my passion is that for this work comes through today to help make this a lively 30 to 60 minutes of your time. And one last fun thing, my son and I, we've been to almost every baseball stadium. In fact, I'm going to one this weekend in Toronto that I've never been to. And we have like 3 others that we have yet to go to. So that's just a little bit about me. Now, let's talk about the objectives for today. We're going to discuss some of the significant problems that I feel have caused the nonprofit sector to lose their way. And we'll get into those, and we'll understand the areas you need to focus on within your data and how you can begin assessing your own data file to identify potential issues that could be impacting you. And then we're going to learn about some tools that you can use to catch those red flags within your donor file and hopefully turn around some of the value attrition and donor attrition that we see going on. But first, I want to talk a little bit about who we are at Veritas. We are passionately donor-centered and grounded in a data-driven approach to mid, major, and planned giving. And our strategy and approach is based on years of work with nonprofits of varying size and purpose, and it's developed from insight from analyzing millions of donor records, working with hundreds of consulting clients, thousands of Veritas Group Academy participants, and we work with thousands of fundraisers and nonprofit leaders over the last 14 years that we've been doing this work. So everything I'm talking to you about today has been learned from all that experience of working with you and your colleagues all over the country and in Europe on their fundraising. So I feel like we've learned a little bit over those years, and then I want to impart some of that over to you. Here's some of the clients that we worked with currently and over the years. As you can see, a smattering of all kinds of different nonprofits, and it's been a joy to be able to serve these folks. Okay, let's move into what we're talking about. I feel like we've lost our way. Here's some of the problems that I've seen with nonprofits in the nonprofit sector in an organization specifically. Many mid, major, and planned giving programs I feel are rudderless and they're in need of leadership. Nonprofits are struggling with record high donor value attrition. I'm going to talk about what that actually means and show you what that means. Fundraising talent, we all know this is a problem, and it's getting worse. Turnover is at a high rate. It's always been bad, but it's even worse today. And as you know, if you're hiring, it's been really hard to find good people. There's a real lack of understanding around mid, major, and planned giving programs with nonprofit leadership. This is what we're finding. They don't actually get what it is, what it really is. And we as a sector, I feel we've lost our way and we've forgotten our missions. So this is some of the problems we're seeing out there, which leads into this. That is understanding donor attrition and donor value attrition. So donor attrition, you all know what this is, or donor retention. We've had a problem in our sector over the last 5, almost 10 years. It continuously goes down. And we've known about this. You can read about it in every trade magazine, newsletter. This is a problem. Everyone's trying to solve donor retention. How do we increase donor retention? What we don't talk about is donor value attrition. Donor value attrition is when a donor gives one year and they either stop giving or they give less the next year. And we don't often see this, and I'll explain that in a minute. But here's an example of donor value attrition in one portfolio of a major gift officer. If If you look at all the donors that gave in year one in this portfolio, $1.9 million. Pretty good. By year three, the same donors were now giving $584,000, or they lost almost 70% of the value of this portfolio from year one to year three by the end of year three. That's value attrition. So some donors may stop giving, but other donors either will give less. And so that's what causes donor value attrition. This is something we don't often look at. In fact, when we do our assessment for most nonprofits, they never think about this. And this is why. Look at view one here. This is how most nonprofits view the strength of their mid and major gift programs. So in this case, if you look just at view one, the bottom line revenue for this organization in mid and major gifts for 1,000 plus cum donors and above was 2.5 million. In year two, it was 3.1. So overall, bottom line number, this program, the mid and major gift program, grew by 21% in just 1 year. So if you're the CEO or the executive director or the development director, you're doing cartwheels down the hallway because you've grown by 21%. And as well you should. You should take, you should feel good about that 21%. However, what we like to do at Veritas is kind of peel the onion back a little bit and look at what the donors that gave in year one, that gave the 2.56 million, what did those same donors do the next year? And as you can see, those same donors now only are giving 1.3 million, or we lost 49% of their value in just 1 year. Now, most nonprofits don't even know this. Why? Because new donors giving at that 1,000 cum level came in at almost 1.8 million and masked the behavior of those donors that went away or gave less. So while they grew 21%, they also lost 49% of the value of those donors that gave in year one, the same donors that gave in year two. We often don't look at this, but this is the thing that's going on in donor files all over, and you don't even know it. Here's another example of this. This is a real client that we did an assessment for, and you can see their program grew from 20 million in year one overall to 23.3 million. So they grew by almost 17% over 3 years. So not bad growth. The CEO, when we presented this, was feeling pretty good about that. But then when we broke it out by individuals and organizations, and then we looked at it by total giving year and the same donors year over year, it painted a little different picture. So you can see from individual class in year one, they gave 10.5 million. Those same donors by the end of year three were now giving 7.5 million, or we lost about 28% of their value over that time. And then new donors in the next year came in giving that 1,000 plus, and they gave 3.1 million. The next year, those same donors gave 1.78 million, or we lost 44% of their value in just 1 year. Now, when you add it all up from the organizations and individuals, in total, this organization lost $9.1 million to value attrition. 9.1. Now, remember, they grew by 17% overall, but they still lost $9.1 million to value attrition. So when we presented this, this absolutely blew their leadership away. They had no idea because remember, they were thinking, hey, we've grown by 17%. But looking at this figure, it caused them to totally change their outlook on what was going on. Obviously, the CEO said something like this: if we could have just recouped half of that, another 4.5 million, say, that's 4.5 million more dollars for our programs. So what is going on? Why are we losing 9.1 million to value attrition? That was the question. So here's some other things we saw in the donor file. They had a number of donors giving the same amount year over year over year. So we see this at so this is an actual snapshot of their donors giving the same amount every year. Same with $25,000 gifts, a number of these. Great loyalty, but giving the same amount. So what does that say? What is that saying to leadership? Gosh, we have these donors that are very loyal. They're giving the same every year. Why aren't we asking for more? Why aren't we challenging donors to do more? Maybe we don't actually know our donors well enough to be able to do that. Very simply, this is how we're losing donors, and one of the ways that we're losing donors. Look at the orange area, because this is what a donor is telling us. The donor is saying, hey, you made me aware of a problem, and you asked me to help, and you said you would make a difference. I believed you, and I gave what I could. And now this is the key area of when a nonprofit has to make a decision of how good are they. Most nonprofits do the red area. They didn't tell the donor how their gift made a difference, so the donor goes elsewhere. This is the number one reason why donors leave organizations, because they don't have any idea how their gift made a difference. Those organizations that are doing well have a whole system and process in place to be able to tell the donor promptly and ongoing how their gift made a difference. Because if they do that well, donors are going to want to give again. And this is a major reason why we see such high value attrition going on in data files, is because we look back and we do an analysis of what they're actually doing with donors. This piece is missing. They don't do this well. They don't thank or report back the impact of their gift to the donor. Here's some other things to keep your eye on regarding stopping the value attrition. So one of the things you want to look at is the number of donors who give the same gift amount annually. If you have a number of those, you want to look at, well, what are the strategies we have that are actually asking the donors for the same gift and they're giving every year the same amount? So you have great loyalty, but if they're giving the same amount, there's a problem, or there's an opportunity there. And then tracking those issues with new money. So the way we looked at scenario 1 and scenario 2, view 1 and view 2 there, are you just looking at bottom line revenue to look at the strength of your mid and major gift programs? Because if that's all you're doing, you're not seeing the full picture. So you need to be tracking how the donors that gave last year are the same donors are doing this year, and then looking at new donors that come in that may be masking the behavior of those older donors. And then there's too much focus on securing new money. So a lot of nonprofits, for whatever reason, are always looking for new people, new donors, getting new money from new donors, and not focusing on their donors who have already said, they raise their hand and they say they love you. Instead of focusing on those donors, which is why you see that value attrition going on, they're trying to find out trying to find new donors. Now, you obviously always need to be trying to acquire new donors because you want a healthy donor pipeline. But if too much focus is on that and not enough on cultivating and lifting and moving up donors up that pyramid or up that pipeline, you will be in serious hurt. And then, do you have the systems within your organization to support reporting on impact? Many nonprofits don't. They don't think about it. And if they do, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we got to tell the donor how they made a difference, rather than having systems and processes in place in conjunction with your program team to be actually able to report on the impact of those donors' gifts. So these are some things to keep your eye on. Now, another thing is really looking at your donor pipeline. And in reality, you should be making it as easy as possible for a donor to go from first giving that first gift to giving that planned or capital gift over time. And many organizations want that. They give lip service to that. They say, of course, we want to make it easy as possible, except they don't do it in practice. Two different ways I can point out. Structurally, they put up barriers for donors to move up. Here's an example. So there are a lot of nonprofits that have membership programs, okay? That's a great strategy to acquire donors and to cultivate donors. But what happens with nonprofits over time is they create a department out of a strategy. So they have now a membership department. And what happens over time is that walls develop, even like physical walls develop. But I'm talking about just a wall with that department that doesn't talk to mid-level, major gifts, plan giving teams. Their membership. In fact, I've seen organizations have membership and then a philanthropy department. I think it's absolutely ridiculous because membership is a strategy of fundraising and philanthropy. But somehow we've gotten mixed up. We've decided that we need to create a department around a strategy. It could be events. It could be sustainers. I've seen where you just have a sustainer department within the organization, and they're afraid to move sustainers up and into mid-level because they'll lose their revenue. So they develop KPIs around disincentivizing you to move donors up the pipeline. Now, another way that we put up barriers is by not having correct strategy. So a lot of nonprofits, and I'm going to show you in a bit, an actual assessment of a nonprofit that is amazing at direct response fundraising with small dollar donors, but terrible at major gifts. And you'll see what it looks like. But the external thing, the strategy thing here is on the mid-level. If you don't have a mid-level program or a strong major gift program or a plan giving program, you're hurting donors, because you're not allowing the donor to give at their full potential. Donors want to give, and you as the organization need to make it as easy as possible for them to give and to give at their best potential. Yet we forget that. We might be really good at acquiring and cultivating low dollar donors, but we yet don't have the programs and the systems to create mid-level, major, and plan giving. So those are all ways, and those are reasons why we see such high value attrition going on in data files. So we talked about mid-level. We see this all the time. There are clogs in that pipeline, and it usually is around the mid-level area. And we usually see it around the 1,000 to 2,499 group, or the 1,000 to 4,099 group, where there's just that area where donors are not moving up. And it's typically because we treat the mid-level donor like we do a $10 or $25 donor. All we're doing is direct response. And that's important, and that's fine, except they need more. They need more strategies. They need more hand-holding. They need people reaching out to those donors to find out what their passions and interests are and start developing those relationships with. But many nonprofits don't have that. And so we see these key clog points in our assessments that we do. All right, so what are some of the things nonprofits need to do to address this? So number one is, going back to this, and I'll say it over and over again, regularly and promptly report back on impact. I'm not even thinking about the thank you side. The thank you is a must. So doing that promptly is number one, and then reporting back as well. Being committed to learning the donor's passions and interests. So that's a key, and that's why in the mid-level area, that's when that starts to develop. When you start to understand, what do your donors actually care about as it relates to what you're doing every day in your mission? And then building that trust between the organization and the donor, and then connecting that donor directly to your mission. These are all things that are going to help you build that relationship with that donor. Okay, so what are some of the things we see in the data? The goal really is to create a fundraising system and strategy that helps your donor give to capacity. That's what we were talking about earlier with the donor pipeline. So you need to ask yourself, are you looking at year-over-year growth of your existing donors? Are you accounting for the impact of that new money that we were talking about? And what is the rate of promotion to major gifts? This is what I mean. So from mid-level to major gifts, what percent of your mid-level donors are moving into major gifts every year? What we have found in the data is when you do not have a mid-level program, you will see anywhere between 0.02 to 1% of donors moving from mid to major gifts. But when you have a robust mid-level program, that moves to 3 to 4%. Now you say, well, that 3 to 4%, that is a huge number. When you add it all up, the number of donors moving in to major gifts from mid-level at a 3 to 4% rate, that's a big number there. And then are you evaluating your donor attrition and donor value attrition? This should be something you're doing every year to evaluate how well you're doing keeping the value of your donors year over year. So I'm going to show you what to do to assess your donor pipeline. This is a very easy step for you to do. Your data person can help you is go to your database and select any donor who gave $1 or more in any one of the last 4 calendar years. And for each donor, export the following: donor counts, cumulative giving totals, average gift amounts, and then put that information so in a chart. And it looks like this. So this is an organization that you can see. Look at all these donors that are coming in, but they're lower dollars. And then you look at the donors on the 1,000+ area compared to above the, so this particular organization does an amazing job with acquisition and sustainers. What they failed to do for years is develop a mid and major gift program. So what you see, look at the $500 level, or the $250 to $499, 22,000 donors here. And then the next level, 8,000. And then the next level, halve it by 4. And then look at this one. From 4,000 donors in the 1,000 to 4,999 level to 175 at the 5,000 level. That's a huge clog. There's clogs all along here. You can see clogs here, but this is a big clog that we have identified. So thankfully, this organization said, yes, we need a mid and we need a major gift program. And I can tell you about that experience, but this is what it looks like. But you can do this for your organization as well. This is where you can find where are your own clogs in your organization. So a healthy mid, major, and plan giving programs happen when all the functions from donor acquisition and cultivation are fully functioning and effective. You have that mid-level program moving into major gifts. That is how you're going to have a healthy program. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like everyone in the organization sees the donor first as a partner, not just an ends to a means, or a means to an end, I should say. They're not ATM machines. These are people. These are partners. These are people that love your mission. We need to treat them as a partner. Gift officers that seek out and then learn the donor's passions and interests. Why? Because we know that when you learn the donor's passions and interests and you match that up with all the programs and projects that make up your mission, they give more. And then the system has to be created to allow the donor to reach their full potential. So looking for those clogs and barriers that prevent you from moving donors up, whether it's you have a department that no longer talks to one another, you have all these silos put up, break them down. Those are all things that don't allow the donor to reach their full potential. And then the organization and gift officers really report back the impact of that donor's gift. That's the 3rd time now I've said that. That is how important that is. So what does it look like with an organization A that isn't doing all that good work and organization B that is? Well, first of all, the value attrition is much less. The revenue per donor is more. So you can see in the organization that wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, and then they changed, their revenue per donor is much higher. Organization A had high staff turnover. Organization B, staff stayed because they were appreciated and valued. Organization A had no offers to present to donors. They were just asking for, operational gifts. But the organization that was doing well had specific donor offers with price tags attached to those. The organization A had no clear plan or strategy, where organization B had a 12-month communication plan for every donor. Total caseload revenue was only valued where in organization B, individual cash flow goals for every donor. So that's huge. And then organization A was chasing prospects with new money, and organization B was only working with qualified donors. And then organization A spent 3 to 4 months every year managing an event, where organization B, the major gift team, was 100% focused on their own portfolio. This is very important. So this is the difference between an organization that's not doing well versus an organization that is, and the differences in what they do. All right, so now it's time to do the live assessment. I want to show you a real live assessment that we did. So I'm going to share a different file here. All right. So what we are looking at is an organization and we're only looking at donors that gave 1,000 plus cumulative in any one of the last 4 years, and then year-to-date giving. And this was from 2017 through year-to-date 2021 at the time. And this organization had 7,266 donors that gave in that range, 1,000 plus cum in any one of those years. And you can see bottom line revenue, this organization grew from 7.3 million to 10.5 million in revenue, or a 44% increase over that time period. So again, they were pretty happy with that 44% increase. Well, then what we did is we did what I showed you before. We looked at individual donors here, and we broke it out by individuals, organizations, and foundations. I'm going to concentrate on the individuals here for our particular purposes. But in 2017, those donors that gave 1,000 plus cum equaled 5.7 million. Those same donors by 2020 were now giving $3.9 million. So we lost 32% of their value from 2017 to 2020, 32% of their value. Now, there's always going to be some attrition. The best in class is somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. So this is above that. And then in the class of 2018, these are new donors that hit the 1,000 cum mark. Maybe not new donors to the organization, but new to hitting 1,000 plus cum was at 2.4 million. Those same donors by 2020 were now giving 1.4 million, or we lost 43% of their value over that time. And then the class of 2019 was 2.3 million. And those same donors gave 1.47 million, or in just 1 year, we lost 38% of their value. So over that time period, just from individuals, we lost $3.8 million to value attrition. Again, they had no idea that this was going on. Why? Because all they were looking at was bottom line revenue. And if you racked up both the corporate and the foundation, in total, they lost $4.1 million to value attrition. Now, I want to then show you their pipeline analysis, which you've actually already have seen briefly, but I'll point it out again. So again, this organization was phenomenal at acquiring and cultivating low dollar donors. you can see, look at how many donors. Overall, they had almost 530 million or 30,000 donors, bringing in 48.9 million in revenue. But look at how little came in from major gifts that were giving over a 10,000. Look at that. It's less than $2 million from gifts of 10,000 and above. So this organization was doing all this really well, but then they didn't have a place for donors to move to. They had no mid-level program, and they really didn't have a major gift program in place. I mean, they did, but they really didn't. They didn't have a structured major gift program at all. They didn't have people out there trained to be major gift officers. So you can see the need here for wanting to unclog this pipeline and start moving these donors through here. And over time, they did that. So this was their pipeline. The next thing I want to show you is we did a 5-year revenue forecast for them. So if you remember that 10.4 million, that was their last full year of revenue from 1,000 plus donors. So we took that, and from what we know about how many donors are moving up into major gifts currently and mid-level, we were able to do a forecast based on what we know about how major gift programs grow. And obviously they grow in two ways. They grow in this case, we believe they were going to start out at 1.1 million. And by the end of 5 years, they were going to be able to hit 4.5 million in total revenue from their major gift donors. How are they going to grow that? They're going to grow that by the number of donors in that program, 150 starting, and by 5 years, hit 250 or 2 major gift officers. They're also going to grow because the revenue per donor is going to increase from $7,500 to $13,678. And they're going to be able to do that because now they're going to have a focused major gift program. They're going to have a very disciplined program. They're going to be developing relationships with their donors. And because of that, they're going to know their passions and interests. They're going to relate it to their specific offers and ask them for more gifts and higher gifts. And that's why that's going to grow. In addition, by the end of year 3, another 20% onto the 2.1 million is going to come more 6-figure gifts. And then eventually 7-figure gifts. So we know that by the end of year 3, if you're really developing those relationships with donors, you'll start to see those transformational gifts come in. And so this is why this program is going to go from 1 to 4. Now, mid-level, they have enough mid-level donors to start with 3 mid-level officers. And over time, they're going to be able to have 12 mid-level officers at the end of 5 years, growing it from $1,700 to just over $3,000 per donor, and grow that program significantly from 3.1 million to 22 million. All told, when we put it together, we believe this program can grow from 10.4 million to 39.5 million. And where their current trajectory was going from 10.4 to 18 million. And over a 5-year period, if they did nothing at all, they were going to bring in $75.2 million from donors that had given 1,000 plus Q. But we believe with a disciplined program, they would be able to bring in 122 million or 46 million more than what their current trajectory was. Now, this was eye-opening to them. And when they decided to start working with us, we put in our program. We created the discipline approach. They did everything we wanted them to actually do. And over a 3-year period, their program, remember what we said, we would be at 39 million in 5 years. We were at $75 million in just 3 years with this program. 75 million. We blew the forecast out of the water. Why? Because they were dedicated and committed to actually creating the mid and major gift program that they needed to create to make it happen. And it was an amazing thing to watch. It's something that all of us in the nonprofit space can do. All of you can do this. So we want to offer this particular assessment first to see where you are and to give you that 5-year forecast. We will do that for free. And the reason we do it for free is, one, we want you to get great information about your donor. We want you to see, what is your donor value attrition? What is your donor attrition rates? And where could you grow? Where's there opportunity for growth? That's number one. And of course, the second reason is it allows us to get in front of you and say, here's where you're at. Here's where there's opportunity. Here's where you could be. And here's how Veritas can help you get there. And I want to reiterate something to you, that is that this is free and there's no obligation to work with us. We want you to get this information, but it does allow us to get in front of you and show you your file. And I think you'll be compelled enough to want to do something about it. And that's what we want. You obviously can do that assessment yourself. It's not that hard. And if you had a data person, you can do the same assessment that we are, but we can do this for you at no cost. We just need a simple data pull. We have a data request that we can send you. It's totally anonymous. We don't ask for any donor names at all, just IDs, so that you can match back who those donors are. And this is what you'd get. You get analysis of your donor attrition over the last 5 years. You get an analysis of donor value attrition. You break down the donor value attrition for individuals and organizations, foundations. You get a 5-year revenue projection for your mid and major gifts. You get that CLOG report, that pipeline report, and where donors are not moving up the pipeline. And then you get recommendations on the number of major gift officers and mid-level officers that will support you. So your data will tell you how many people you would need to hire for mid and major. What does your data, what are your donors telling you that you can actually afford? So to get your free assessment, you can go to this website and download the information, and we'd love to see that. And so we hope you take advantage of that. So we've done hundreds and hundreds of the assessments. Every time we do it, every time they come away, the organization that we do it for comes away with new insight. And they don't all work with us, and that's fine. But the fact that you get new insight into your donors is awesome. And that's what we want to see. So, Rebecca, this would be a great time to take some questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all of that great information. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can pop those in the Q&A area or in the chat. I've got both up on my screen to make sure that I get as many of your questions answered today as possible. We already got some good ones, but you can feel free to keep posting there. So Lance had a question about the reasoning for why we do this analysis for donors at the level of 1,000 plus, and was wondering if there's a case for doing this analysis at different levels or for all donors, regardless of giving level.
The reason we do it at 1,000 plus, or sometimes we move down to the 500 plus, depending on the size of the organization. So if you're a small organization, we would do it at a 500 plus level, because we're trying to look at the strength of the mid and major gift area specifically. But would it be helpful for you? Yes, of course, to know what your donor retention and donor value attrition rates are for the donors that you're acquiring and what they're doing year over year. Yes. And in most cases, most donor data CRM systems are able to help you figure that out. They have those reports built in. What they don't have is this part, the upper end of the file. So yes, it would be beneficial for you to do a dollar up.
Great, thank you. Christine had a question that I'm going to adapt a little bit to add another component to it. But
Okay.
do you have, or do you think that capital gifts or like pledge gifts impact that value attrition? And if so, how do we look at that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, it does. So they are in there. If they're giving a cash gift, they would, we see that often. But one of the things that we do is we we show the data in two different ways. One with all the donors, and then we look at donors that we call variants to take them out of the data. So when we're evaluating them, to actually get a really good idea on value attrition and whether or not donors who are giving pledges are skewing the overall trends. So we sit down with you to look at that. We do a data discovery when we do this, and we ask you those kind of questions. Are there donors that may be skewing the trend with your donor performance? And so we would look at that.
Great, thank you. We got a few questions, kind of going back to the first part of the presentation and the few mentions that we had regarding reporting on impact. So Jessica had a question, just if we could share some examples of what we mean by telling donors that their gift has made a difference. What does that look like for a
Yeah,
major gift officer?
that's a great question. So here's what it looks like. I mean, there's all kinds of examples, but say a donor is giving to start new wells in Africa. We'll just make that up. So a way to report that is an actual written report that said, hey, you gave $100,000 to build 10 new wells. Here's an update on where we are on building those. And you give a report from the field. Here's how your gifts are making a difference. And besides the wells being built, how many people are being served by each one of those wells? Another way to do that would be to have a program person actually take a video of when that well is being built and when the water starts gushing out of the well, and reporting that and recording it and sending it to the donor and saying, your gift made this happen. So that's an example of how you can report back the impact of a donor's gift.
Well, and I think something that we've always talked about is that knowing your donors' communication preferences and how they want to receive this information and how
Yeah,
frequently is really important as well. So you
that's
just
a
want to
great
take
point.
that into consideration. If
Yeah,
I give a gift and you try to call me about it, it's not going to be my communication preference. So you want to make sure you know that.
right.
Um, and so Barry kind of had a related question as well. Is there a definition that we use for prompt reporting? Um, or is it really affected significantly by the type and complexity of what you're reporting on?
I think it's the latter. So yes, I would always be reporting back. So if a donor gives a gift and you're thanking them properly and promptly, that's number one. So you're thanking the donor for that gift. I would say within the next 3 months, there is some kind of reporting back on that specific gift based on the complexity of and the amount of the gift and what you're trying to do. So like building a well, quarterly updates would be like, okay, we're starting the process of building these wells. Here's a picture of them being built. And then finally it took a year, but we now have all 10 that kind of thing. But some might be quick, it could be we need to feed 1,000 people at Thanksgiving, and you send in your gift, and on the day after Thanksgiving to get a report that said, but because of your gift, we were able to feed 2,000 people yesterday. That is a prompt way to report back the impact of your gift.
Wonderful. So we had one question submitted about whether or not the strategy that we've been talking about and that you shared with today would apply for MGOs that have a mix of individual and corporate donors on their portfolio.
Yes, absolutely. The way we look at it is, even though it's a corporation, you are still connecting to an individual from that corporation. And so you are reaching out to them. Now, maybe the solicitation is different because corporations have a set way for you to solicit them, but you are still developing a relationship with the people in that corporation. And so, yes, that plan incorporates reporting back, thanking, all kinds of things related to the people that are at that corporation, the same as an individual. Yes, different little differences, obviously, but the same idea of creating a plan for every donor, whether it's an individual or a corporation, is the same.
Great. We have a couple questions just about some practical questions with the assessment. So one person asked if they should wait until after one of their big fundraising events of the year to do an assessment, or if they should go ahead and get that process going.
I don't think it matters. It actually, you can get that process going now, and we'll still have all the 4 years prior. So you'll have year to date today, but then we'll have the 4 years prior, and that gives us enough information to know how your donors have been performing over time. So if you wanted to wait, you could do that. But it's not fundamentally going to change the overall picture because we've got 4 good years prior of data.
And then one other question about the assessment. When we get that data pull from people, do we ask them to include pledges and pledge payments, in their data pull
All
for
cash
giving?
cash in. So if it's a pledge, it depends. Some organizations will actually put the pledge in 1 year. Let's say it's a $300,000 pledge over 3 years. They'll put $300,000 in year 1 and then nothing in 2 and 3, versus when does the cash actually come in? So we would talk to you if that's the case, where you have a pledge in versus actual cash in the door, because we want to see cash in the door.
Great. So one person also asked about time, the bit where we were talking about time spent managing events and kind of focusing on these other areas and the
Yeah.
comparison of those two organizations. So could you speak to why we really recommend having your major gifts team focus as solely as possible on
Yeah.
managing a portfolio versus and kind of what we recommend for involvement with events?
Yeah. So first off, I will say this: we're not against events. They can serve a useful purpose, especially for acquisition and cultivation of donors, and building your brand as well. But what happens when nonprofits go wrong is they involve their major gift team in the planning, in the process of the breaking down of the event itself. And so you have all of these major gift officers diverting their attention, and many times they ask the major gift team to kind of plan the whole thing. And that's where you see 3 to 4 months of their time is around the whole planning of and leading up to the event, rather than spending the time on their donors, where we know is where the ROI is. The return on investment is within that donor portfolio. And if you're diverting the attention away of your major gift team towards events, you're actually going to see a lower return overall with your donors and less revenue, because they're not working their portfolio, which they should be, in building those relationships.
Great. Christine had a question. Does a formal donor recognition plan with naming opportunities and giving circles move the needle on donor and value attrition?
That's a tricky one. It depends on the organization that you're a part of. What I hesitate on is using donor recognition or giving circles as the motivator for people to give a gift. Because what it does is it takes away the meaning of giving towards the mission, giving towards wanting to alleviate a need or a problem, and instead diverts the donor's attention towards, if you give, we'll now call you this, or you'll now be a part of this. Those things are fine as long as you're really helping that donor find joy in their giving by addressing the need that you're addressing as in your mission. And oftentimes we're afraid, or we don't know how to talk about the need. And instead we say, hey, if you give now at this $10,000 level, you'll get X, Y, and Z from us, and you'll be part of this club. I understand circles is because people like to be part of other people giving, as long as you're doing it in the context of the mission, and that they're giving because they're alleviating that need.
Great. She said that was helpful. Thank you. We also got a question from Dale, and I'm curious, I don't know if we have looked at the data this way, but he was curious if value attrition is different when you have 1,000 plus cum donor coming in that has upgraded, really has moved through that donor pipeline, maybe from a lower level, versus maybe they come in at that level to the organization. So is there any difference? Have we ever looked at value attrition from upgrading donors or new at that level?
You're basically saying, is there a difference between source of acquisition in a way? Or if a donor comes in from a low dollar to versus coming in at a higher level? That's a good question. We have actually not broken it out that way. We're just looking at bottom line donors that give 1 year. What are those donors doing the next year to get a full read on the overall value attrition? But if we had the data, we could break it out that way. Depending if we have it coded correctly, we could break out performance by source, like direct mail source versus event sourced versus major donor event thing or whatever. We could break that out if we actually had the data, if it was coded properly.
Great. Elias has a question kind of going back to the conversation we were having around reporting on impact, and was just curious how you handle continuing to report on impact and nurture that donor relationship when maybe your donor's focus changes, maybe internally to a different project or externally to a different organization.
Well, I think you're always trying to develop the relationship and deepen that relationship with the donor. So hopefully, if you're doing that well, you will be able to sense when that donor's shifting in, maybe they gave to one project and now they're interested in another. Well, how do you know if they're interested in another? Hopefully, you're talking to them along the way and getting that information from the donor so that it goes from reporting back on that particular project to the next project, or even knowing, like, what is my donor interested outside of our organization? Those are all good things that over time, if you're doing this well, you'll develop the trust of that donor to be able to tell you those things. And so I think it really is all about how well do you know the donor? And if you know the donor well, that's the ultimate, what you're trying to do is understand your donor's passions and interests. And they may have multiple passions and interests related to your mission. But having that information, it will only happen if you continually develop and nurture that relationship with the donor.
Great. Vicki shared a few interesting notes and about plan giving. And I know we've also been having lots of conversations about
Yeah.
plan giving and how that is so critical, and
Yeah.
actually a really valuable tool in increasing revenue. So I was wondering if you could also speak to that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, plan giving is probably the most underutilized, next to major gifts done in nonprofits because they it feels foreign, but in actuality, people are thinking about this. Um, People are thinking about, what am I going to do? Leaving a legacy? What kind of nonprofit do I want to leave in my estate plans? And yet, most nonprofits aren't asking their donors about it. And so, I would encourage you all, especially in the mid-level area. This is where we see a lot of planned giving um, donors or prospective donors in that area, because what we see is a lot of the planned giving donors are actually giving, mid-level type gifts, but they want to leave, non-cash gifts later. Um, and they can leave bigger gifts later. So there is a huge area in the mid-level, and a big key indicator, if you look in your donor file, if you look at donors that have given uh, for like 20 years in your file, consistently, and we see this a lot. They've given like $100 or $500, so they kind of fly under the radar for major gifts, but they're giving consistently. These are your best prospects for planned giving. So that's one of the areas to look at in that donor pyramid that we were looking at, or the pipeline. How many donors are in that area that have been, how long have they been with you?
Wonderful. Well, I believe that wraps up all the questions. If you have another question, we do have a couple more minutes, so you can pop that in the Q&A or the chat. I did want to let everyone know that I've put the link for the free donor file assessment that Jeff showed us, that you can review that information on the website and apply to get your assessment done. That link is in there. And then I did also just share the plan giving link as well, in case you're interested in that assessment.
Awesome.
So I don't see any other questions coming through.
All
So
right.
we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you,
All
Jeff,
right. Thanks,
for
Rebecca.
all of, yeah, for everything that you did. And thank you all for joining us today. And as a reminder, we will send a recording and the slide deck out in a little bit. So you will get that via email. Thank you all so much.